Welcome to the Ukrainian Institute of America. My name is Walter Hoydysh. I'm chair of programs at the Institute. The Ukrainian Institute, in collaboration with the World Jewish Congress and the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, is pleased to present this book signing event, The Genius of Judaism, by the world-renowned public intellectual Bernard-Henri Lévy. The book is published by Bergman and Random House. Adrian Karatnycky, a member of the board of directors of the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter and member of the National Advisory Board of the Ukrainian Institute of America, will introduce the program. Adrian, please.
Good evening, and thank you for such a terrific turnout. Can I ask both of our speakers to take their seats, please? Make yourselves comfortable. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the Ukrainian Institute. We are honored to have Bernard-Henri Lévy, an amazing public figure who's blazed a trail of passion on behalf of human rights and freedoms around the world. He is well known for his strong defense and advocacy of Israel. He is equally known for his many years of support for Ukraine's struggle for democracy. Bernard-Henri Levy has visited Ukraine numerous times. He stood on the Maidan with civil society as it pressed for the liberalization and the opening of that country. He went to the front lines to places like Bernard-Henri, which were being bombed by the Russian occupation forces, and showed great civic courage. And in his encounters with Ukraine, which are detailed to a degree in the book, he also encountered a very important resonant connection to the subject of his book, to Judaism, because Ukraine, of course, is the birthplace of Hasidism. It is the birthplace of many of the founders of the State of Israel. It was a place resonant as an original homeland, sometimes hospitable and sometimes inhospitable to the Jewish population. So we are delighted that he is here at the Ukrainian Institute. I am co-director of the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, and the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter works to maintain a dialogue between the two communities, between the states of Israel and Ukraine. And Bernard-Henri Levy has also been a very important partner of ours in this. I'm delighted that there are several of my colleagues from the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter and also the Chief Executive Officer of the World Jewish Congress, another partner of ours for many years, Robert Singer. Both Bernard-Henri Levy and Robert Singer spoke at the commemoration of the tragedy of Babi Yar several months ago in Kiev, where for a week our organization, the Ukrainian government, and major Jewish organizations worked together to commemorate the victims of that terrible atrocity, that terrible event of the Holocaust, where over 40,000 Jews of Kiev were shot in a two-day period. And both these gentlemen delivered very passionate remarks. The program will be the following. There will be a conversation with Bernard-Henri Levy led by the estimable Vladislav Davidzon, who is currently a resident of Odessa, editor of a wonderful publication, the Odessa Review, which is in its second year, the best English language journal of Ukrainian subject matter in the world, bar none, but it is published in Odessa, which is good enough. And Vlad, who is an American who has made his home, at least temporarily, in Ukraine, as an important public figure in discussing the cultural politics, culture and the arts in Ukraine, and has over the years had many interactions with our guests. So he will lead a discussion for about half an hour, conversation with Bernard-Henri Lévy about the book, about the subject matter of the book. Then we'll throw it open for about 20, 25 minutes for your questions. And I repeat, I will urge you to refrain from comments, but simply make questions to the author. And then the purpose of this is a book signing, so there will be an opportunity to purchase the book at a very timely hour. Honored guest, Bernard-Henri Lévy, has consented to autograph copies, which is terrific. And so again, at the same time, there will be a light wine and wine reception in the back room. So the book selling will occur at the signing will occur in the middle room, and we look forward to moving briskly to achieve all of our many aims, and that this conversation will whet your appetite and excite you enough to purchase Bernard's wonderful book. And I thank Bernard in particular for his friendship and above all his steady devotion to countries and to peoples who face dangerous enemies and who are under a great peril, whether it is the Kurds or the Ukrainians or Jewish minorities around the world. He is there as the leading voice, and their leading moral voice, and one of the most forceful voices in their defense. So a great honor to welcome them to the Ukrainian Institute. I turn it over to Vlad. Vlad, take it away.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Adrian. So I want to start with the story of how I met Bernard in Paris on my 29th birthday, a week after Maidan 3 years ago. Because it's an amazing story, and it was actually the start of my friendship and my camaraderie with Bernard. And Bernard is, of course, a remarkable man, a great friend, and a great friend of Ukraine also, which is why a lot of us are here today, including our friends at the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, like Beryl. So my editor, David Samuels, at Tablet's European Culture Correspondence, sent me to talk to Bernard and to write a profile of him. I didn't see if David Samuels is here. He was supposed to be. He's a brilliant journalist, and he published yesterday in Tablet the most remarkable interview with Bernard. It's really great, right? And it's really worth reading. So if anyone has the time or the inclination, please go on Tablet magazine and read both Adam Kirch's response to the book and Bernard's brilliant interview with Mr. Samuels. So a week after the Maidan finished conclusively, Bernard had brought Mr. Poroshenko and Mr. Klitschko to Paris for the beginning of the presidential campaign, which is getting started. And this was maybe a year and a half before anybody else in France had figured out that Ukraine would be the battleground of the new Europe, and that whatever happens in Ukraine, in a way, would decide the future of Europe and NATO and the liberal order. These conversations that we're having now in the op-ed section of the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Bernard was maybe like 18 months ahead of the curve, and he knew immediately that this was very important. He had spoken on Maidan, and he was the first major French intellectual to bring Poroshenko into the Elysee to speak to Mr. Hollande, right? Yeah. So this is a remarkable scene. 1,000 Ukrainians with flags and this remarkable energy on Saint-Germain-des-Prés a week after the Maidan, and it's very difficult to replicate that scene. And it was a remarkable moment that Bernard organized for the Maidan in Paris. And I want you to start talking about that night and what happened afterwards and what you think about the Maidan situation.
The most remarkable thing was not me to bring Petro Poroshenko and Klitschko in Paris. This was, in a way, easy. When you were on Maidan, when you saw the strength of the spirit of Europe blowing on Maidan, when you guessed that the worst repression could arrive like a thunderstorm on these young girls and boys and elder men who might kill, the immediate reflex was to do whatever is in your power to try to help, to try to increase the support of the civilized world in favor of Ukraine. So the idea to bring Klitschko and Poroshenko to Paris, and in particular to Élysée, was not so difficult to have. What is most remarkable is that François Hollande, who I think had heard about Vitaly Klitschko as one of the biggest, greatest boxers of all times, but not yet as a great politician, François Hollande, President Hollande, who had not heard, I think, a lot, not to say worse, about Poroshenko. Poroshenko was just candidate since a few days. He was in the polls in Ukraine, few percent. Klitschko was leading, Yulia Tymoshenko was very high also in the polls, and Poroshenko was very low. So the miracle was that Hollande accepted to receive them. They were not chief of state, they were not, they were opposed to a very important partner of France, which is Russia, and so on. So this was the real thing. And I remember this moment in the office of François Hollande when Klitschko and Poroshenko sat in front of him and in front of his military and political advisors, when they began to describe the hope of the Maidan, the embracement of the values of Europe, and the disaster which it would be if this vibrant heart of Europe, which was the Maidan, were to be abandoned by Europe. When this happened, when I saw the face of President Hollande, who is, as all these chief of state, they are in a way Iron Man, hard to move, frankly, hard to be moved. When I saw on his face the trace of a very strong emotion, I was very happy, and this was really a great moment. Great moment. A few days after, a few hours after, it happened that I have a few habits in a very fashionable cinema of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, which my magazine owns it in part and so on. So I decided it's a real cinema, a theater. I asked to cancel the movie which was released this night, which was a movie of Woody Allen. I asked to cancel with all the, I knew that Woody Allen would understand. We canceled the screening, the commercial screening, and in place of it, we decided to organize a talk with Poroshenko and Klitschko. It was not announced. Nobody knew. It was not in the press. It was not in the news. It was not on TV. We just put a little message on the Facebook a few hours before, maybe 2 hours before. 2 hours before on Facebook were enough to have this cinema of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, Le Saint-Germain, full, to have the square in front of the cinema full of people, European flags, Ukrainian flags, and so on. And in a way, I think, maybe you will contradict me if I'm wrong, but I think that the two first real speeches this Poroshenko made in this part of his time, he had been minister before, it was on the Maidan, the day when I met him, and on the Saint-Germain-des-Prés, when he made a huge speech, absolutely charismatic. And all those who saw Poroshenko this night And this afternoon at Élysée, did not know about him, but they got instantly that this man, who was the lowest in the polls, would be very soon the man of the situation. He was so great. He expressed such a calm force, and he was so charismatic that the Parisians knew probably before the Ukrainians that he had a very big chance to become president of Ukraine. So this was the day of my meeting with Vlad. After that, a few months after, 1 year after, in May 2015, there was the preparation of the commemoration in Paris on the beach of Normandy of the D-Day, of the arrival of the American soldiers on the ground of France and of the liberation of France against Nazism. And I was again in Kiev, and I spoke again in Maidan for the second time. And I received on my telephone an alert that on the beach of Normandy this day, June 2015, there will be President Barack Obama, that there will be, the Prime Minister of England, maybe the Queen of England, all the most moral consciousness of the world, of the biggest people. And I heard that Putin was invited. That Vladimir Putin will be among this fine crowd. So I sent a very respectful message to my president. And I told him, how can we, France, invite for the commemoration of the defeat of Nazism one of the man who embodies today at least the worst populism, if not the worst crypto-fascist neo-nationalism. There is something which does not match. I sent this message to my president with all my respect. I had a reply. The reply was that I might be right, but that anyhow, this man, Vladimir Putin, was the chief of the country who was part of the defeat of the Nazism at this time, because he is the Russian army of today inherits the inheritor of the Red Army who defeated Hitler. This was the reply. So I sent another message by appropriate channels. I sent another message rather quickly saying, okay, in the Red Army of the time of the battle against Nazism, there were Russians, but there were also Ukrainians. They were members of the Red Army. And they are even the ones, in part, the first Ukrainian front, who liberated Auschwitz, who entered in Auschwitz. The first man who entered in Auschwitz was a Ukrainian Jew named Anatoly Shapiro. And the first tankist who was at the top of the company led by Anatoly Shapiro was another Jewish man. I forgot his name now, Gabinevsky or something like that. Again. So, okay, if France is compelled, feels compelled to invite Vladimir Putin, the least of the justice should be to invite also Petro Poroshenko, who was not yet president. It was in March. The election was in June. And again, President Hollande had the graciousness, the political sense, the good anti-fascist reflex, which consisted in inviting, though he was not yet elected, the future President Poroshenko. And this is why a few weeks after, we all were to see shake hands, very cold, between Putin and Poroshenko. This is where took birth and stemmed the the so-called normal format and so on. So this is really the great thing. It is my president of my country, who was not always defects, who is also can be a great country, having really supported Ukraine from the very beginning.
Yeah, let's before we get back into Ukrainian Jewish relations, we're here to talk about the book. So, in order to get to the bottom of things, let's talk about the taxonomy of your thinking, about your metaphysics, your liberal internationalism in defense of the other, your universalist insights and particular conflicts. It all starts with Jewish philosophy. Before you got to Ukraine, you were doing this for about 40 years now as a liberal interventionist, one way or another. How does it all start, and what is the connection between the Jews and Ukrainians and philosophy?
The question is, what is the connection between?
Well, let's get back to the Jews and Ukrainians later. The book is about your taxonomy, your philosophy. So you connect your last two interventions, which are in Libya and Ukraine, to your philosophical grounding, your foundation.
My involvement in Ukraine is, first of all, is connected with my anti-fascist, with my European conviction. As you said, my dear Vlad, I had the immediate feeling that if Ukraine collapses, Europe will collapse. Number two, my anti-fascist feelings. I know that the propaganda of the Kremlin said that the fascists were back on the Maidan. I am among those who knew that it was exactly the reverse. The anti-fascists were prevailing on the Maidan, prevailing even over their own fascist tradition. They were winning over that. It was a great victory of anti-fascism, and if there was some fascism somewhere, it was in the Berkut unit, it was in the special police of Yanukovych, and it was in the Kremlin, where in Russia, where if you were Chechen, if you were a little too dark, you were in danger of being beaten and sometimes killed. And number three, it was part of my Jewishness, of my Jewish philosophy. I devote the biggest part, the most important part of this new book, to a commentary of the book of Jonah, the prophet Jonah, who is ordered to go to speak, to scream, whatever, not to Israel, but to the place of the otherness, and to the most remote of the others. This place is Nineveh in the Bible. So I think about this story of Jonah going to Nineveh, not understanding why he should go to speak to these people who have been in history so big enemies of the Jewish people. And of course it could not but ring a bell to my own long time history and to what I was doing at this time. Because at the end of the day, I knew, and I still know, but I knew since always, that Ukraine has been the place of terrible anti-Semitism. I knew that Ukraine, I had read all the testimonies of Père Patrick Desbois about the Shoah by bullet. I knew all of that it had been one of the places where the fiercest anti-Semitism would express itself. But precisely, what I explain in this Genius of Judaism is that precisely when this country, this place of sorrow, of suffering, and of mourning begins the work of remorse, the work of remembrance, when he begins courageously, bravely, this work of mourning, as the Freudian would say, work of mourning. It has to be supported, and it is the duty of a devoted Jew as I am to be there, to help, and to take the hand which is extended to him. This is what my way of conceiving the Judaism, of being a Jew, ordered me. This is one of the reasons why I spend so much time as a Frenchman, as an internationalist liberal, but also as a Jew between Kiev, Lviv, Kramatorsk, and other places. Because for me, nothing is more valuable than this spectacle of a country honoring Metropolitan Andrei Sheptytsky, of this country honoring the memory, the souvenir of the dead of Babi Yar, of this country beginning to build some memorial for the dead without grave, without name sometimes, and sometimes without precise number. This moment of the history of a people who has been cursed by the most terrible anti-Semitism, this moment of redemption is one of the most remarkable, beautiful, valuable things which you can expect from history. As a Jew, this is what I think, and as a Jew means that this is for me the proper core of what I call in this book the Jewish Encounter.
That's a good answer. Yeah. I would, yes. So since we're going off in the direction of geopolitics, it's obvious that in the way that decommunization is taking place in Ukraine, and it's not taking place at all in Russia. Right? The trauma is not being treated, the wound is not healing, and it's gangrening, and some nasty things have happened in the body politic of Russia. So if Kiev is going forward into the future and for sort of European liberal democracy, Russia's sliding back. And in between this, you have the specter of the Jew. You have Jewish graveyards, you have large amounts of Jews in both countries, and this kind of triangle between Russians, Jews, and Ukrainians is extremely interesting. So you touch on this in the book, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about your thinking on that.
What impressed me in Ukraine, Vlad, and we were together also in this instance, is the way in which the Jewish ghost proceeds, walks, and revives in Ukraine. We were together. You were there also in Uman. You know what is Uman? Uman is a city, a little city, 2 hours drive from Kiev, where you have the grave, the monument of one of the most revered, respected Jewish thinker, Nachman of Vladislav, the author of the theory of the burnt book. The book, the hidden book, and the burnt book. The 3 books constituting together the most holy and whole possible thought for a worshipper and a thinker. Rabbi Nachman of Vladislav is one of the most respected Jewish thinkers. For me, it is an absolute crucial name. Part of my genius of Judaism of this book is put under the umbrella and under the shadow of Rabbi Nachman of Vladislav, and this Rabbi Vladislav happened to have his grave in Uman. Uman is a little city, but it begins a big city one time in the year, the day of Rosh Hashanah, when there is a big pilgrimage of all the devotees of Nachman of Vladislav coming from all over the world. Rabbi Nachman de Vladislav was not exactly the father of the Hasidism, but some sort of. So the men who worship him are men in black, very different from Ukrainians and even from secular Jews. I mean, black too is also a wide trend, by the way. But you see them, and they have big families, and they come these days, this proper day, by thousands. Maybe Uman is 5,000 inhabitants during the year. This day, the population multiplied by 5 or 10. Great people, but who great and great spirit, these worshippers of Nachman de Vladislav, but who are little, they sing all night, they make a lot of noise and so on. And of course, every year there has been an incident, and you reported the last one. But I could not help thinking, the year when I was there, and
it's a complete madhouse. It's 30,000 religious fanatics having fun.
Not fanatics, no, not fanatics.
Mystics, yeah.
Certainly not fanatics, or you did not read my book. Or
I read that book and I read the book.
So, mystic, yes. Fanatic, no. Because they devote all of their time, which is the opposite to fanaticism, to the endless study. These guys, these fans of Nachman de Vladislav, their job is to read the Talmud from day 1 to day 365 of each year endlessly, and to find some new depth in the Talmud, and to dig some new holes of thought in the verse of the Torah and in their commentary in the Talmud. So they are not fanatics. They are the contrary. A fanatic is someone who is stuck on interpretation. Those guys, they relaunch the interpretation. But no, the real point is that I'm not sure that in my country, in France, I could find a city of like Uman receiving, accepting, and being in its big majority happy, like in Uman, to receive these tens of thousands of worshippers and so on. So this was, for me, really amazing. These guys came to revive the ghost of the dead Jews. And they were, in a way, they are each year, apart from their very bad incidents, accepted by the population. I tell in my book the story of one of my visits to Lviv, the city of Lviv. When I arrived in Lviv, I was taken by a terrible embarrassment. I could not sleep for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And after 3 days, I understood why I could not sleep. I felt that I was physically surrounded by ghosts. Lviv is the city of the camp of Janowska, where the Jews, the local Jews, were deported in the expectation of their definitive deportation to the camps of extermination. It is the place of the forest of Lysinitsky, where you have probably from 80,000 to 100,000 of unburied, or just like this, recovered by earth, by Arglashou, Jews. And all of that during the time of during the Soviet times, without any memorial, without any sign. Lviv is the city of the Golden Synagogue, which was one of the most beautiful synagogues of this area of the world, this Austrian-Hungarian empire. And in the place of the Golden Synagogue, you have, since 50 years, a big black hole. So all this for me was a sign of this mute and ignored presence of these unburied or badly or ill-buried Jews. And I had a meeting with an audience of young students of Lviv. There were a lot, maybe
It was the Lviv Media Forum we ran.
media forum. There were hundreds. And they asked me, what do you think of our city? And I began to say banalities, and then I decided to say the truth. I told them, this is a great city, one of the beating heart of Europe, for sure. It is the capital of the best European writers, but there is this. I cannot sleep since 3 days because of Lisinski, Janowska, Golden Synagogue, and so on. And then 2 things happened. The first thing, I understood that they did not really know. They did not really know. There was like a sort of a huge occultation, repression of these terrible truths. But the second thing which I discovered is that they were happy to know. And the whole discussion went on what point? What can we do? What can we do to help these ghosts to take their real place, to have their definitive rest? What can we do to repair the fault of this generation, of our fathers and grandfathers? And for me, this very word, which was pronounced by so many young women and men of repair, of course it could not but echo to this great Jewish notion, which is the tikkun olam, reparation. The task of a Jew, the reason why you're Jew is to repair the world. If you are a mystic, you say to repair the broken vases of creation. If you are a secular like I am and like we are a certain number to be, it is just to repair the broken world. And these Ukrainian non-Jews, these non-Jews Ukrainians, were refinding in this conversation with the French Jew I was, in their words, in their language, this tradition of tikkun olam. And it was a great moment, again, for me. So this presence, unbearable presence of the ghost, and this will to give them a proper and decent place in the world, this ghost probably in Lviv, more numerous than the Lviv. This thing was one of the most moving moments I spent since years, and that's why I devote to it all these pages of this book.
Adrian's telling me with, I think, time for one more question. Just to, I think, complete the script of Ukrainian Jewish relations. Last time I was here with Adrian at the event, a couple of months ago, I was leaving, and I was leaving with a Jewish friend afterward, and this person said to me, you know, before this crisis, you would never have seen events like this in Ukrainian diaspora and Jewish diaspora here, especially in the Ukrainian institution. And it's actually remarkable verbally that the relations between Ukrainians and the Jews are moving in some direction. That they're moving. And I actually wanted to talk to you about your well, so right before we got to Uman, it's just an anecdote. Right before we got to Uman, we went to Uman right after a political conference. There was an annual political conference called the Yes Yalta Conference, which a Jewish Ukrainian businessman by the name of Pinchuk runs. I was flying in from Vienna, and I was on a flight with 200 Hasidim and the Prime Minister of Ukraine, was the Prime Minister Yatsenyuk. And we were standing, I was standing next to Mr. Yatsenyuk at check-in, And he took the time to welcome every single one of those 200 Hasidim into the country. He would walk up to people and say, "Shalom, welcome to Ukraine," in the middle of Vienna airport. It was the most surreal thing. What do you make of something like that? And she takes advice on all this.
What I told you, it is the same for me. When Petro Poroshenko comes to Badia, first of all, organizes with you guys, Adrian Karatnycky, Bernard, and all your groups. When he takes the responsibility to organize this memorial for Badia, which means to beg pardon to the Jews killed in such a savage way. It is what Yatsenyuk did, but in the most sacred and noble way. This is the Ukraine of today. The Ukraine who reveres as the Ukraine who puts at the top of her modern pantheon the just, the righteous among nations. Ukraine is, as you know, in terms of number, the fourth country in the world, in terms of number of righteous among nations, the fourth. After, don't know what, it is the fourth. Since a few years, there is still bad heroes in the pantheon. There is still in the Ukrainian pantheon a will not to know who are really some of the nationalist heroes. There is still a way not to know what really happened in Lviv when the German troops arrived in the city and were welcomed by some as liberators. But you have also this hailing of the righteous among nations at the top of the most revered, profane saints of the Ukrainian nation. And in such a short time, the work of memory, the work of mourning, which we French, it took us French 30, maybe 40 years to implement it. It took Germany a long time also, decades. I must say that Ukraine, starting 30 years later, because still 1990, nothing happened. The history was frozen by the Sovietism. The whole Soviet Empire was supposed to have been immune of any sort of fascism and so on. So no question of all that. So the process started very late and even later. And the speed to which it goes, going from the scene, the gracious scene you described in the airport of Vienna, not surrealist, a gracious, realist, gracious. Stepping from that and arriving to Poroshenko in the forest of Badia, having the great words in hand, this is a lesson, frankly, a lesson of, I don't know where it will go. Maybe it will go back, I don't know. But for the moment, it is a great lesson of history, living memory, and therefore democracy, and therefore European democracy addressed by the new Ukraine. I must add one thing. On the Maidan, I was on the Maidan, as you say. I spent some time, enough time to speak twice, to address the people of Maidan. There is two things which struck me immediately. And of course, I was especially, and this also is in the book, I tell that and I explain why. Thing number one, the Jews were there. The Jews, whose fathers and grandfathers had been unburied in the forest of Lysynsky, were on the Maidan. With the Cossack, with the Russian speaker, with the Ukrainian nationalists, they were there, supporting the Maidan. opening the dictatorship of Yanukovych, asking the troops of Putin to get away of the east of the country. And the thing number two, which impressed me, and believe me, I waited some time before being sure. I looked and looked before expressing what I'm going to tell you. In this place of Maidan, which was the place of all the possible freedom of speech, all the possible freedom of speech. Every fantasy could be said. The best things were said, and sometimes the most stupid things were said. It was a place of freedom, a sort of a big political Hyde Park corner in front of the killer of the Berkut. There is one fantasy which I never heard. There is one sort of graffiti which I never read on the walls. But there was again all sorts of everything. It was fantasy and graffiti anti-Semitic. On this place of all liberty, there is one liberty which was not taken by the average demonstrator of Maidan, was the liberty to be anti-Semitic. I understood at this moment that something really strong was happening, and really quick was happening in the old rotten kingdom of Ukraine, having a great reviving and renewal at this time.
Thank you. So, thank you, Vlad, for opening the door to the eloquence of our author and speaker. But we do have a few minutes, as I promised, for questions from the audience. Please be laconic, even if you're not Greek. But questions from the floor to the author. They can be on any. The conversation focused mainly on Ukrainian Jewish relations, but the book has a much wider ambit, and if you have questions beyond it, you're welcome to. This is your chance. Yes, please.
I'd like to ask our honored guest whether he has been offered an honorary citizenship of Ukraine. If not, I propose that we ask our president to do so.
Thank you very much, madam. I would be more than honored by that. Hopefully, you will be there. I accept few honors, by the way. I am one of the rare Frenchmen of my age, old age, and reasonable situation who does not have one thing which is called the Légion d'honneur. You know Légion d'honneur? Okay. I don't have it. I don't have any decoration of my country. I love my country, but for many reasons I think that an intellectual like me, is one of the signs of his freedom is that he does not accept some honors from strong states, and in particular so this is my crazy doctrine. I have only one, I have two, by the way. I have two honors. One was given to me by the President Izetbegovic during the war in Bosnia, in Sarajevo, under shelling in 1993. It was a medal called Le Blason, which was the highest medal in Bosnia. I think there is two foreigners who have it. Three foreigners, me plus two, I was one of the three. I accepted with an infinite gratitude. The second one I have was given to me by, at this time, the President Saakashvili in Georgia, after the Russian aggression against Georgia, after the torrent, the tide of propaganda of Russia, of which I was one of the opponents. I tried to oppose my voice by the channels to which I had access, in particular the daily Le Monde. I tried to oppose my voice, the voice of the truth, to the propaganda. And President Saakashvili, who is very impulsive, as you know, had probably the idea that I did not such a bad job, and he offered me again a medal. I don't remember the name, but I accepted with a great gratitude. So, citizenship of Ukraine will be the third of the same sort, honors deserved, given by a state under attack. These sort of states are those to whom I don't fear to identify myself and who I'm very pleased to support.
I have a question and a comment. As a child survivor, we very often get together and talk about the horrible things that happened to us. I was a child in Poland. But always when we compare the evils that took place, it's like, oh, the Germans were terrible, the Poles were terrible, the Ukrainians, they were the worst. And you wonder how long will it take for us to receive that kind of healing in this generation that you cannot measure. It's difficult to measure who was the worst. But from my point of view, it was the Germans, not us. From another point of view was the collaborators. Some more, some less. But somehow the Ukrainians come into the picture as the worst. And my question is, how long will I be thinking that way? You're making a point of we should already begin to be healing to Konrad. But there are those here in my life who have memories. And it's very difficult to eradicate them. You know, and I know I'm a member of the Righteous Gentiles, I'm involved, and I bless them, and I send money to them when I can. But it is something so deep that I don't think a book or a lesson or anything or bringing in the Breslov will ever heal the memory when you constantly think about the Ukrainians. That's it.
Madam, I don't know really what to reply because your question is an abyss of complexity.
Is a what?
Abyss.
Oh,
Evil, unable to establish, and this is not my purpose in this book, to establish some degrees in evil. This was more evilish than this one. I don't proceed this way. I cannot say. What I say in this book, there is a theory of the evil. What is evil? What is the creation which allows evil, which gives space to evil, whatever the sort? This is my concern. This is what I try to articulate in the book. The other thing which I try to articulate is what I told you. The worst, I don't know what you mean, but the best for the moment in terms of prevailing against the dark past are the Ukrainians. If you compare the Ukrainians to the Russians in this dealing with memory, then I can say that the Ukrainians are the best. And the last thing I would say on this reply to you is that for me, I'm here since 2 weeks in New York. I had the chance, in a way, to be here in these very special days, which are facing the United States of America. And it's an experience for a European man to see all that happened in the last days. I was attending a lot of public debates. I gave a respectable number of lectures. I would say that the most moving moment for me of these last 2 weeks in America is probably today because of this encounter. I don't know who is who. I'm not going to make a count, but this encounter of proud Ukrainians and affirmative Jews under the same roof, hearing us speaking about this dark past, uniting and opposing the Jews and the Ukrainians, this is frankly a great news. And this is for me a great rendezvous, and I will remember it as a great moment of this sequence of time. Jews and Ukrainians under the behalf of the Ukrainian Institute of New York. It's a treat.
Mr. Bernard-Henri Levy, I want to ask you, how do you apply the framework you have created in your recent book, Incisive Judaism, to understanding the condition of the Jews in America today?
How do I apply my framework about the Jews to the situation of the Jews in America today? I think that an American Jew who has read my book or who would read it will understand, for example, why one can be a secular Jew, one can be a non-believer Jew, one can be a Jew feeling that the sky, far from being full of a divine presence, is dark and empty, can be and is probably a real, true, strong, proud and affirmative Jew. I think that this match more or less with the experience of a lot of American Jews. An American who will read my book will probably understand or begin to understand also why the partition, the dividing line between liberal Jews and Orthodox Jews is a false one. Why this is not the question. I devote a big chapter of this book explaining that this way of opposing the men in black to the secular liberals is completely un-Jew. That the real partition is the dividing line between Jews who study and Jews who don't study. Jews who try to understand the world and Jews who don't care about the understanding of the world. Jews who believe that the heart of Judaism does not have so much to do with the marriage, with the quagmire of politics, and those who accept to be enlisted and stuck in the quagmire of politics. This matches also with the situation of American Jews. An American Jew who will read my book will understand, yes, probably also, that what saved the Jews during millenaries was their devotion to something which is much higher than ideology and politics. What saved them is their devotion to a text which describes the power, the kings, the prince, and so on, as important people, of course, but much less than the prophets and the wise. And therefore, that to be a Jew consists in refusing absolutely to be taken in hostage, to be hijacked, to be kidnapped, by any political camp. To be a real Jew means to put the core of Judaism above the bad language, la mauvaise langue of the political conception of the world. And in a moment when you see some nihilist policies trying to enlist, trying to give the kiss of death, trying to embrace in an obscene way the Jews, this is a good thing to remember. That Jews have been Jews, and that they have been great Jews as long as they have kept themselves apart from this dirty game. This is what in my book I think one of the things, but many others, which I wrote, probably thinking also of the American Jewry. I must make you a confession. The man is here, but I said it this morning at the Park East Synagogue. He was not here. The first one, the first publisher who asked me to speak on this book, to deliver it, was my American publisher, Mr. Will Murphy of Random House, who is here. So it was not my French publisher, it was my American publisher, Random House, Will Murphy. Which means that at the end of the day, this book, I am working on it since years and years, probably decades. It's the eldest of my books. But when I decided to put an end to it, when I decided to interrupt the infinite, endless process of it, I thought, because of what I tell you, because of my conversation with my American publisher, probably more to of the American Jews than of the French one. And I'm asked, since I'm here, but I'm happy of your question, I'm asked about the situation of the Jews in France. Of course it's important, but it is not the real question of my book. I was certainly obsessed more, addressing myself more to the American Jews than to my fellow Jewish countrymen in this review of Judaism. Madame.
Yes, perhaps my question, in fact, is addressed to you because you're involved in the Jewish-Ukrainian relationship. I'm sorry, but it's a few weeks ago, Ukraine was one of the 13 nations that had a UN vote pushing against Israel. So, to me, as to many of your views, both parties actually, Republican, Democratic, was a great disappointment. Can you address that?
Well, I don't speak for the Ukrainian government, but what I can say is that the Ukrainian government, in my view, should not have supported the resolution. However, it was in the company of Japan, Britain, France, and other democracies that also joined in that vote. And I think it's a broader problem. It's not a problem specifically of Ukraine. It's a broader problem that needs to be addressed more broadly to the democratic world. I think there's a much more. I don't think that the problem can be focused on the Ukrainians alone. They were acting in an international context, and in my view, it was the wrong decision that they made. But they made that wrong decision with a lot of other countries. So it's a much broader problem for the friends of Israel. I think that the proper position, at the very least, should have been an extension. But yes, and I think that it was not done with a lot of conversation. It's not clear that these decisions were actually taken at the very highest level. It was seen by the Ukrainians as a routine decision. I think it was unfortunate because it was a very important thing, and they were not on the right side. But
Adrian, can I interject just a little bit? Because so I worked on that issue, and I am the journalist who broke the scoop that the Obama administration put extreme pressure on the Ukrainians to do that. There was a phone call directly from Vice President Biden to Poroshenko on December 17th. Of course, the Ukrainian government will deny. There was a phone call that everyone knows about, but there was extreme pressure put on the Ukrainians. In fact, this was This was confirmed to me by multiple people in Tel Aviv and in Washington, and certain Ukrainian Jewish businessmen close to the government. So on this question, of course, my good friend Adrian Karatnycky would say that, but as a member of the American Jewish community who is a foreign correspondent in Kiev and works on this issue, on this, there's nothing to reproach Ukrainians. They were put into a lose-lose situation by not going to presidential administration.
Thank you.
I think we have to wrap up this evening simply because if we continue, it will make superfluous the purchase of books. And I think that one of the purposes of this, and I know there are representatives of Random House here, which is to allow you to have the genius of Bernard-Henri Levy coming to you home, because he will not come home with you. Or maybe you will. I want to remind you before we break up that there will be a book signing, and I will ask a colleague of mine from the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter to close the evening. One last point: the Ukrainian Institute has a rich cultural program, musical program. In March, for example, we will host an important Ukrainian composer who composed a Hoydysh for Babanyor, which was performed at the time of these ceremonies. So please log on to the website or pick up literature. This place is a place of interesting cultural and musical activities, and you are welcome to enjoy it and to be a part of this growing community. And there will continue to be other events that the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter and our friends in the Jewish community will jointly do in this lovely space. And before I conclude, I'd like to ask my colleague from the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, Beryl Rodell, to close the meeting.
I would like, Adrian, sorry, Beryl, in 1 minute. Sorry for Honoraus, maybe I will sign less books, but I would like to add one word about the resolution, because this is important. You are completely right. This resolution was a shame. It was a shame because of the place, it was a shame because of the moment, and it was a shame because of the wording. The place, which is UN. UN is dishonored regarding human rights and regarding Israel in particular. It is the last place in the world where lessons should be given to Israel. It was the wrong moment because, come on, few weeks before going out of office for one or for the other, to think about one's legacy on the back of the little Israel, a few weeks after not having dared to raise the same hands in order to prevent Aleppo, was a comedy and was a cheat, and it was a circumcision. The same hands who did not have the courage to abstain on Israel did not have the courage to prevent Aleppo in the same place. And the wording was terrible of this resolution, because even in the sentence, which was supposed to please Israel, the sentence condemning terrorism, the sentence was terrible. It was, we, the subscribers, condemn all forms of violence, including the terrorism. One could frankly wonder what are these forms of violences, of which terrorism is only one part. So it was a shame on all regards. And it is important, and it saddens me, because it is one more sign of a process which has begun years and years ago, a process which is increasing the loneliness, the solitude of Israel. The loneliness of Israel, the demonization of Israel begins to be a real concern for, maybe for you, maybe for us, and for me. And big part of the book, this is what I wanted to tell you, a big part of the book is devoted to this, to a reply to this demonization, to this satanization of Israel, which is, first of all, the last mass, which is first of all unfair. Israel should be praised even on the and not even, mostly on the standards of liberalism. The standard value of the liberal should not condemn, but should praise Israel. And maybe more important, it is the last mass and the most probably terrible which we have to face of the old anti-Semitism. And this is what I try to say in the book. I devote a huge part of the book to that, because for me it is one of the most burning issues which I think I will have to face for the rest of my life. Thank you.
We are not going to try to upset you now. The book, don't be misled. Just because it's a work of poetry, philosophy, and history, and beautifully written, doesn't mean that it's not a very important book for our time, number one. It's a book, though it has Judaism in the title, it's a book that should appeal and should be read by all. It's the great sage Hillel, one of the great sages, once observed, if I'm only for myself, who am I? Who will do for me? If I'm only for myself, what am I? And not now, when, then. And that is Bernard's freedom. Hillel also was approached by somebody who said, teach me the whole Torah and sign on what? And he said, that's easy. Don't do unto others which you don't want others to do unto you. All the rest is commentary, go and study. And that's true also for the millennia of the relations between Jews and pagans. There's much to be studied. It's not all dark, complicated, worthy of study. And one of the things we do in the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter is study. Our motto is, our stories are each other. So is our future. Our future involves each other. So Bernard, I thank you for your friendship, your candor, your poetry. Dare say I love you. And it's been a privilege to be in your company, and perhaps I speak for everyone here if they share my sentiment. Thank you very much.